Every week, countless women enter therapy offices feeling lost, alone, and struggling to find fulfillment in their lives. On the surface, these women may appear successful, confident, professionals, content wives and mothers, carefree students. But behind this veil often lies a deep well of pain, insecurity, and emotional wounds. For many of these women, the root of their struggles can be traced back to a damaged relationship with their father. Now, a woman's relationship with her father, whether it was with her biological dad or with the patriarchal society that shaped her, has a profound impact on her sense of self, her relationships, and her ability to thrive in the world. When this primal bond is impaired, it can leave lasting scars on a woman's psyche. Now let's examine the stories of 4 women, each with a different father-daughter dynamic, to illustrate how inadequate fathering can manifest in a woman's life. Now Chris is a driven and successful businesswoman in her late 30s and is the oldest of 3 daughters. Growing up, her parents had wanted a son, and her father placed immense pressure on his children to excel academically. To win her father's approval, Chris studied relentlessly and followed in his professional footsteps. Her father rewarded her achievements by spending time with her at his office. As a teen, Chris' father was very strict, rarely allowing her to date and criticizing the few boyfriends she had. Her mother always deferred to her father's authority. In essence, Chris was living the life her father had wanted for the son he never had. While she rebelled in some ways, like having affairs and using drugs, she was still shackled to her father's ideals of hard work and accomplishments. By her 30s, Chris was a top manager, but plagued by headaches, insomnia, and exhaustion. She felt trapped by her own perfectionism and inability to relax and enjoy life. In therapy, Chris realized she was not living her own life, but rather the one her father wanted. So gradually, she began to let go of her compulsive overachieving. She started writing short stories, a pursuit her father derided as impractical. As Chris continued differentiating herself from her father's expectations, her own authentic path started emerging. Now the second example is Barbara, a bright but directionless student in her late 20s. Struggled with failed marriages, abortions, drug abuse, weight issues, and money problems. Her father had been absent during her early childhood due to war and later drifted between jobs and gambling. Her mother was pessimistic and believed that if Barbara's first marriage failed, she would never succeed. Now, with an unreliable father and fatalistic mother, Barbara had no role models for stability or success, so she constantly procrastinated on schoolwork and racked up debt. Her dreams were filled with murderous men attacking helpless girls. So Barbara was unconsciously repeating her father's pattern of aimlessness and fulfilling her mother's prophecy of failure. But once Barbara realized these toxic patterns, she began to change. She got her finances in order, quit drugs, finished her coursework, and wrote an excellent dissertation. She took control of her eating and lost weight. These accomplishments gave Barbara a sense of personal power. Now, in her dreams, the threatening male figures transformed into helpful guides. One dream showed her father giving her an embroidered robe, symbolizing her strengthening feminine identity. The next is Susan. Susan had a very close, almost flirtatious relationship with her easygoing, fun-loving father. Her mother was disappointed that her husband wasn't more ambitious and successful. Susan absorbed her mother's discontent and compensated by becoming perfectionistic and controlling herself. Outwardly, Susan lived out her mother's unfulfilled ambitions, but inwardly, she was racked with tension, insomnia, and teeth grinding. Despite loving her laid-back father, she feared men were weak and incapable. Like her mother, Susan had unrealistically high standards that no man could meet, so she remained single into her 40s. She was also becoming burnt out from her non-stop striving. Now, Susan's dreams encouraged her to slow down and not push so hard. She realized her driveness came more from her mother than herself. She also recognized she had played the role of her father's surrogate lover, which interfered with her relationships with other men. So as Susan stopped judging herself and others so harshly, she became more open. Eventually, she met a caring man, but had to resist the urge to reject him for not earning enough. By attributing this criticism to her mother's voice, Susan was able to let the relationship blossom. Our last example is Mary. Mary grew up with a strict military father who demanded regimental obedience from his family. Her easygoing, artistic nature faded under his authoritarian parenting. As a teen, she rebelled by using drugs and running with a wild crowd. She dropped out of college despite her artistic gift. Mary's father had a chronic illness that left him weakened and vulnerable at times, a side of him which he tried to hide. So to Mary, he seemed like two different persons, the harsh disciplinarian and the feeble sick mind. Now Mary's dreams reflected this plea, featuring men who were either important with tiny fellows or violent and murderous. The important men represented her lack of confidence, while the dangerous men were the voice of her self-attack. Mary's mother was warm and outgoing like her, but didn't stand up to her husband. Now through therapy, Mary gained self-confidence and saw how she both rebelled against and submitted to authoritarian figures. She asserted herself, and the threatening dreams figures started fading away. Mary entered a healthy relationship later and married. With her newfound strength, she returned to her artistic passion. When her father had a health crisis and admitted his vulnerability, Mary was able to connect with him on a deeper level. Now, while each of these four women had a unique father-daughter story, they all suffered from the absence of a positive, supportive fathering influence in their lives. Whether their fathers were too rigid, too absent, too indulgent, or too weak, these women did not receive the paternal love, guidance, and role modeling they needed to thrive. As a result, they struggled with issues like perfectionism, lack of direction, overcompensation, and rebellion. A dream shared by one wounded woman poignantly captures the impact an impaired father-daughter bond can have. In the dream, a young girl is trapped in a cage with her baby, sobbing as she watches her father riding freely on a horse in a green pasture. The girl yearns to reach her father and tries to break out of the cage, but it topples over, leaving her uncertain if she and her baby will be crushed or liberated. Now, this dream powerfully depicts the sense of separation and imprisonment that a damaged paternal relationship can create for a daughter. The father represents a free, vital energy that the daughter longs to connect with, but she cannot access. She is confined, along with her own creative potential, that is the baby, by the bursts of her paternal wound. To break free, she must take a risk. The collapsed case could destroy her, but it could also release her. Now, for a woman to heal from an impaired father-daughter relationship, she must first recognize the ways in which this primal wound has shaped her life. She may need to grieve the father she didn't have and come to terms with his limitations. By understanding how she internalized her father's voice and expectations, both positive and negative, a woman can start to differentiate her own identity. Now, on an individual level, the father-daughter wound can manifest in many ways. One common source is the extremely weak or shameful father, the man who can't hold a job, has addictions to drinking or gambling, or brings embarrassment to the family. His weakness becomes a source of shame for the daughter. Another is the absent father, who is missing from his daughter's life, whether by choice, as the man who abandons his family, or due to circumstances like death, war, divorce, or illness. Now, his absence deprives the daughter of a crucial male presence during her development. The fathers can also wound their daughters by going to the other extreme, the overindulgent father who spoils his daughter and fails to provide healthy limits, values, and authority. In some cases, he may even unconsciously make his daughter his romantic focus, keeping her psychologically bound to him. Now, some fathers may look down on femininity because they have sacrificed their own feminine side to meet cultural ideals of masculinity focused on power and toughness. Even if outwardly successful in his career, this type of father is often emotionally detached and passive at home, not actively involved with his daughter. The common trait in all of these situations is the father not being fully present for his daughter in a committed, responsible way, not encouraging her intellectual and spiritual development, not valuing her uniqueness as a female. This results in an injury to the daughter's feminine spirit, her sense of self-worth and identity as a woman. Now, beyond the wounds inflicted by individual fathers, there is also a collective father-daughter wound that stems from our cultural attitudes. Patriarchal societies that view women through an abstract stereotypical lens, seeing them only in limited roles rather than as complete human beings, are wounding the feminine on a broad scale. Whenever we find an authoritarian attitude that devalues women's real lived experience and tries to force them into narrow, predefined boxes, the cultural father is overpowering the daughter, stunting her growth and creative unfolding. This cultural wound impacts most women today, layered on top of any personal father-daughter injuries. When faced with the father-daughter wound, some women get stuck in blaming their fathers or the masculine in general. Others take the opposite approach, denying there is any problem and just conforming to traditional gender expectations without questions. But both these paths avoid taking responsibilities for one's own transformation and healing. The real challenge for women today is to embark on a journey of self-discovery, to find out who they truly are apart from cultural and familial conditioning about who they should be. A key part of this process is openly and honestly examining one's life story and the developmental influences that have shaped it, for better or worse. It requires looking at how the relationship with one's father and the surrounding cultural attitude towards women have impacted one's growth. As the first and most important male figure in his daughter's life, a father has tremendous influence over how she relates to her own masculine qualities and to men in general. He also significantly shapes her sense of uniqueness and individuality, since he is the first person who is clearly other, different from daughter and her mother. The way a father relates or doesn't relate to his daughter's femininity sends a powerful message about how she should view her own womanhood. Part of the father's role is to support his daughter's journey from girlhood to adulthood, from the sheltered world of home into challenges of the wider world. His attitudes towards work, achievement, and meeting life's demands become part of her attitudes. Ideally, a father provides a healthy model for authority, responsibility, decision-making, discipline, and dealing with the world in an ordered, rational way. As his daughter matures, he should gradually let go of control so she can internalize these qualities and incorporate them into her own personality. If instead the father is either too rigid and controlling or too permissive and irresponsible, it will skew his daughter's development of these capacities. Some fathers fall into the category of the eternal boy or puer aeternus, the man who never grows up psychologically. Like Peter Pan, he remains in an adolescent mindset, unable to handle the challenges and commitments of mature adulthood. These boyish fathers are often dreamers and drifters, imaginative and creative, but unable or willing to bring these ideas into concrete reality. They may start many projects but finish few. Charming and fun to be around, they can inspire with their visions and enthusiasms, but they flee from the hard work and endurance needed to actually manifest something in the world. At their worst, these eternal boy fathers are grossly irresponsible, the addicts who can't stay sober and repeatedly let down their families, the man who can't hold a job, the serial womanizer always chasing the next affair. For the daughters of these poor fathers, the legacy is often insecurity, weak boundaries, anxiety, and a shaky sense of self. Without a strong fatherly presence to rely on, these daughters grow up feeling unprotected and untethered in the world. They may be prone to enmeshment in relationships, having trouble separating from partners. If their fathers was an embarrassing failure, they may carry a sense of shame and inadequacy. There can also be a tendency to idealize men, always seeking the perfect partner to fill the void left by the father. Intimacy and commitment in relationships is a challenge because they never had it modeled by their father. On the deepest level, these daughters often feel spiritually adrift because their father did not mirror back to them a secure sense of the masculine principle of consciousness, order, and higher meaning that grounds human life. On the other end of the spectrum are fathers who are extremely rigid, authoritarian, and controlling with their daughters. These men are often cut off from their feelings and feminine side. They place a high value on obedience, duty, rationality, and towing the line. Dictatorial and domineering, they lay down the law and expect their daughters to follow the rules without question. Deviation from traditional rules and society's expectations are not tolerated. Displays of emotion, vulnerability, or creativity are often mocked or shot down. While these rigid fathers provide a clear sense of order and stability, it comes at the price of the daughter's individuality. Her natural feminine qualities of spontaneity, receptivity, and emotional attunement are suppressed or attacked, leading her to reject or distrust this vital part of herself. The daughters of authoritarian fathers often struggle with an entrenched harshness, either towards themselves or others. Even if they rebel against their father, that rebellion often has a hard, unyielding edge to it. Some spend their lives dutifully complying with their father's expectations, never breaking away to discover their authentic self. Others remain permanently locked in blind opposition to their father, unconsciously letting him control their life through their impulsive need to defy him. Whether they submit or rebel, these daughters frequently have difficulty embracing their own instinctual feminine nature because it was so unacknowledged by the father. Relationships with men and their own generative creativity are often complicated as they were not validated in these areas growing up. Of course, most fathers are not a pure embodiment of either the eternal boy or the rigid authoritarian, but rather a mix of both. And even fathers who seem to be entirely one way on the surface often have the opposite extreme lurking in the shadows. The strictly rational controlling father is prone to erupt in bouts of irrational, chaotic emotion that are all the more terrifying because they are so denied and repressed. The daughter never feels secure as she senses that dad might fly into a rage or even sexually threatening behavior at any moment. Meanwhile, the boyishly permissive father usually has a hidden streak of cynical, embitterment judgment toward the very qualities of impulsiveness and aliveness that he ostensibly celebrates. He may abruptly turn on his daughter, attacking her for the same unrestrained qualities that he refuses to discipline in himself. While the father-daughter relationship is central, the mother's role is also crucial in a daughter's development. The dynamics between the father and mother and how they fit together as a parental unit have a huge impact. Oftentimes, an eternal boy father is paired with a mother who takes on the responsible parent role that the father has abdicated. She becomes the primary authority figure and disciplinarian, which can lead to her being even more rigid and controlling than a typical authoritarian father. In this scenario, the daughter is doubly wounded. Not only does she lack a strong father figure, but the father doesn't protect her from the mother's dominance. She may remain entangled in an unhealthy identification with the mother well into adulthood, or she may unconsciously replicate the same harsh masculine stance that the mother had to adopt. The reverse pairing is also common. The cold, dictatorial father married to a meek, childlike wife. Here both mother and daughter are under the father's thumb. The mother models feminine passivity and dependence, leading the daughter to repeat that disempowered pattern or to rebel against male authority without having a clear sense of her own feminine strength. When both father and mother are stuck in eternal adolescence, the daughter usually grows up with very little stability or security. The immaturity and lack of commitment in the parents often leads to chaos, abandonment, and the breakdown of the family structure, leaving deep scars. And if both parents are rigid authoritarians, the daughter gets a double dose of harshness with no softness to counterbalance it. Her natural feminine qualities are assaulted from both sides, making it extremely difficult to develop a healthy sense of herself as a woman. The two common and most often conflicting patterns that emerge due to the father-daughter wound are what some call the eternal girl or puella eterna and the armored Amazon. Now, the eternal girl is a woman who has psychologically remained a young girl, no matter her actual age. She stays a dependent daughter, accepting the identity projected onto her by others. In doing so, she gives away her own strength and lets others shape who she is. She may marry a controlling man and become the type of woman he wants. She often appears innocent, helpless, and passive, or she may rebel but remain a helpless victim, stuck in self-pity, depression, and inertia. Either way, she is not in charge of her own life. In contrast, the armored Amazon develops as a reaction against an inadequate father. These women identify with masculine traits and functions. Since their fathers didn't provide what they needed, they feel they must do it themselves. They build a strong masculine identity through achievements, fighting for causes, or controlling others. But this identity is often a protective shield against the pain of abandonment or rejection by their fathers. It shields them from their own softness and vulnerability. The armor helps them succeed professionally, but can also cut them off from their feminine side, creativity, relationships with men, and living spontaneously in the moment. Outwardly, they may appear confident and strong, but in private, they reveal weariness, loneliness, and tears. Both the eternal girl and armored Amazon are disconnected from their true selves. Most women have both patterns alternating within them. One part feels shy and fragile, while another feels competent and authoritative. They often despair over feeling alienated from their center, cut off from important aspects of who they are. It's as if they live in a mansion but only occupy a few rooms. Now, the eternal girl fails to develop the positive masculine qualities a father can foster: consciousness, discipline, courage, decision-making, self-worth, and direction. Without this, she feels weak, helpless, and under the control of outdated patriarchal principles. The armored Amazon reacts against this, but ends up cut off from her own feminine side. So healing involves recognizing these patterns, grieving the wounding, and reclaiming the lost parts of the self. It means learning to value and integrate both the healthy masculine and feminine within. Only then can a woman fully inhabit all the rooms of her inner mansion and live from her authentic center. The journey is challenging but leads to greater wholeness, creativity, and aliveness. Now, Soren Kierkegaard provided valuable insights into the concept of despair and its manifestation in human lives. His work, Sickness unto Death, delves into the idea that despair stems from a disrelationship to the self, which is the essence of being human. Kierkegaard identifies three primary forms of despair: unconscious despair, conscious despair manifesting as weakness, and conscious despair manifesting as defiance. Now, in the first form, unconscious despair, individuals are unaware of their disconnection from their true selves. They often lead hedonistic lives, seeking pleasure and sensation without any higher commitment. Although they may not consciously recognize their despair, the compulsive pursuit of infinite sensation and the occasional moments of boredom and anxiety indicate an underlying problem. When these dark moments of boredom and anxiety are acknowledged, the person becomes aware of their despair and realizes their disrelationship to the self. This leads to the second form of despair, where the individual feels too weak and shows the self and accept their strength to make the decision. Many people, particularly those who identify with the puella archetype, may suffer intensely in these days, yearning for courage and the ability to take risk and commit, yet feeling afraid and unable to do so. However, if the person delves deeper into the reasons for their perceived weakness, they may discover that it was merely an excuse to avoid their inherent strength. This realization leads to the third form of despair, the despair of defiance. In this stage, the individual recognizes their ability to choose the self, but consciously refuses to do so, defying the powers that transcend reason and human finitude. They refuse possibility and infinitude, while in the despair of weakness, they refuse actuality and finitude. Ultimately, both forms of despair are two sides of the same coin, representing a split in the self. To To overcome despair, Kierkegaard suggests that individuals must take a leap of faith, accepting both their weaknesses and strength, and recognizing the interplay between the finite and infinite realms of being human. This involves moving between opposites rather than identifying with an absolute. The works of Carl Jung provides valuable insights into this process of personal growth and integration. Jung believed that each person's life is a complex and mysterious whole, shaped by personal experiences, cultural influences, and innate temperament. However, individuals often emphasize one part of their personality while suppressing the conflicting part. Jung argued that personal growth involves acknowledging and integrating these opposing sides, allowing them to work together harmoniously. For women who find themselves caught between the eternal girl and the armored Amazon archetypes, this integration is crucial. Each archetype has its value, and by learning from one another, women can lay the foundation for their emerging selves. Now, although a woman's relationship with her father may have been impaired, healing is possible. According to Jung, the psyche possesses a natural healing process that strives for balance and wholeness. Archetypes can serve as inner models when outer models are absent or unsatisfactory. By connecting with the unconscious, women can access the positive and creative aspects of the inner archetypal father, compensating for negative influences in their actual life histories.